There is a concept we are constantly taught in school, that the world is controlled by nations, by presidents, prime ministers, and politicians. We talk about borders, armies, and flags. But what if the real rulers of the world, the ones who truly control your money, your food supply, and even your government's budget, never had flags? What if the real empires had only last names? For 3 centuries, a hidden architecture has been built, not on battlefields, but inside banking halls. It's a network that transcends nations, survives revolutions, and outlives every single head of state you've ever voted for. We are talking about a small, exclusive group of approximately 12 families' names, like Rothschild, Rockefeller, Morgan, and others less known, who perfected the art of perpetual generational control. They created the central banks. They financed the Industrial Revolution. They controlled the flow of oil. And now, they own the largest portion of the world's debt and technology. You may think this is a conspiracy theory, but what you are about to see is a pattern woven deep into documented history. They didn't seize power. They simply engineered the system so that all power flowed back to them. Here is the unthinkable. We talk about nations, but the real empires never had flags. They had last names. And this is the story of the hidden empire and how it works. To understand this concept, we must first accept a painful truth. Wealth is permanent, but political power is temporary. A president serves 4 to 8 years. A CEO might last a decade. But a dynastic family, operating across generations with a single, unified purpose that lasts forever. This is the central thesis of the hidden empire. Power is not measured by what you rule, but by what you own. Their central strategy, which we will uncover, rests on 2 pillars: debt and dispersion. First, debt. They realized that lending to governments was far more profitable than lending to consumers. By financing wars and national infrastructure, they turned nations into their permanent debtors. This created a leverage point that could be used to influence policy, trade, and even the creation of central banks, the ultimate mechanism for control. Second, dispersion. The hidden empire operates not as one single entity, but as a dense, overlapping network of foundations, trusts, holding companies, and global banking houses. They own competing companies in the same market, making it appear like a free, competitive system when in reality, the profits all flow back to the same top layer. This makes the power structure virtually invisible to regulators and the public. Today, we will trace this exact blueprint from its origins in 18th century Europe through the American industrial boom and see how the pattern is being completed in the digital age. Let's see how it played out and why the world we live in is a direct product of their design. The foundation of the hidden empire was laid by 3 main historical architects, each perfecting a different dimension of global control. Case Study 1. The Rothschilds and the Birth of Perpetual Debt. The story begins in the 1700s. With Meyer Amschel Rothschild in Frankfurt, Germany. His empire wasn't built on trade, but on financing governments and wars. Rothschild understood that information and mobility were key. He strategically placed his 5 sons in the 5 major financial capitals of Europe: London, Paris, Vienna, Naples, and Frankfurt. This created an unprecedented, private, cross-border financial network. During the Napoleonic Wars, they perfected their craft, financing both sides of the conflict, guaranteeing returns regardless of who won. There was no mistake. Their brilliance was in the system. By financing the British in the final battle against Napoleon, they were ready to capitalize. Legend and history suggests they received word of Wellington's victory at Waterloo before the British government. They used this information to execute a massive, manipulative trade in the London bond market, consolidating their wealth and cementing their status as the unofficial central bank of Europe. The result was the creation of the government bond market as we know it, a permanent debt mechanism for nations. The Rothschild motto became, "Permit me to issue and control the money of a nation." And I care not who makes its laws. This was the true silent seizure of power. Case Study 2. The Rockefellers and the control of energy if the Rothschilds controlled the money. The Rockefellers controlled the engine of the modern world, energy. John D. Rockefeller didn't just drill for oil. He mastered the refining and distribution pipeline. His Standard Oil Trust achieved a near-perfect monopoly over the world's oil supply, giving him control over the global economy's bloodstream. He was the first to scale a critical resource to global dominance. In 1911, the U.S. Supreme Court broke up Standard Oil under antitrust laws. This is the crucial point. It was not a collapse. The massive trust was split into dozens of smaller entities, Sung-Som Mobile, Chevron, etc. They appeared to be competitors, but the Rockefeller family retained controlling stakes and influence across all of them. It was a strategic retreat, diversifying risk while maintaining ultimate control. They learned that decentralized control is more robust than centralized ownership. This legal action taught the dynasty how to hide in plain sight. They created massive tax-exempt foundations like the Rockefeller Foundation to control their wealth, fund academia, and influence public policy, ensuring the political system never seriously challenged their core interests again. Case Study 3. The Morgan Empire and the Birth of Central Banking. J.P. Morgan represented the bridge between the old European dynasties and the new American economic superpower. He understood that coordination was the final piece of the puzzle. Morgan was the ultimate crisis fixer. During the Panic of 1907, when the U.S. government couldn't stabilize its own economy, Morgan personally locked bankers in his library, forcing them to pool their resources to stop the collapse. He demonstrated that the true power lay not with the Treasury, but with him. His demonstration of power led directly to the creation of the Federal Reserve System in 1913. The system was marketed as a government-controlled mechanism to stabilize the currency. In reality, it was a partnership between the government and the major New York banking houses, including the Morgans, Rockefellers, and others. By creating a system of private shareholder banks controlling the nation's money supply, the hidden empire institutionalized their power. The Federal Reserve and other central banks modeled after it became the ultimate tool. It allows the government to borrow massive amounts of money, and those funds flow directly through the institutions controlled by the very families who orchestrated its creation. And they all made the same mistake. The same one we're making right now, believing the system is too big to fall. Every dynastic consolidation of wealth follows the same 5 stages of blueprint perfected over centuries. Once you see them, you can't unsee them in the modern economy. Stage 1. The initial acquisition, the resource lock. The family identifies a single, central choke point resource, be it land, feudalism, gold, early banking, oil, Rockefeller, or, today, data technology, modern giants. They achieve near monopoly over this foundational asset. Stage 2. Institutionalizing the debt. The central bank phase. The wealth is converted into influence over national debt. They push for the creation of systems like central banks that make governments permanently reliant on them for financing. This moves their wealth beyond the reach of revolution or nationalization. Stage 3. Dispersion and invisibility. The foundation strategy. The physical assets are broken up and scattered into a complex, decentralized web of tax-exempt foundations, trusts, holding companies, and charitable organizations. The family name recedes from the headlines, while their control remains, making them immune to public scrutiny. Stage 4. Cultivating the mind. The educational control. They begin funding academia, think tanks, and media organizations. By shaping what is taught and what is reported, they ensure that public discourse and future politicians never question the fundamental financial architecture, i.e., the legitimacy of the debt system itself. Stage 5. The global integration, the final merge. The separate family interests begin to merge and overlap through strategic marriages. interlocking directorships, and international bodies like the WEF or global financial forums. The goal is a seamless, borderless financial system where capital can move instantly. But national regulation remains slow and siloed. This is the stage we are completing now. And right now, the modern world has already completed 4 of them. Today, the hidden empire doesn't wear a top hat or sit on a throne. It sits on the boards of the largest asset managers and technology firms. The scale of their control is exponential. The old empires controlled oil and steel. The new empire controls passive wealth and information. Take the largest asset managers in the world, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. They collectively manage over $25 trillion in assets, and they are consistently the largest or second largest shareholder in nearly every major publicly traded company in the world: Apple, Google, Coca-Cola, Pfizer, Amazon. Who owns BlackRock and Vanguard? When you trace the ownership structure back far enough through ETFs, mutual funds, and trusts, you find the same deep-rooted dynastic capital, protected by the very foundations and trusts created decades ago. This is Stage 3, dispersion and invisibility on a grand scale. Stage 4, cultivating the mind, is clear. Foundations funded by these families spend billions influencing foreign policy, public health, and climate science, directing governments to adopt policies that ultimately benefit their enormous investment portfolios. They define the problems, and then they finance the solutions that require massive government spending, which requires massive government debt, which is ultimately purchased by their financial institutions. The COVID-19 pandemic offered the perfect example of Stage 5. Global integration. Governments worldwide executed coordinated, simultaneous financial and public health policies. Trillions of dollars were printed by central banks, immediately flowing to the largest corporations and financial firms. Massive, unearned transfer of wealth to the top, disguised as a necessary crisis response. The system is now too intertwined. Nations talk about sovereignty. But when a handful of firms backed by dynastic capital are the largest owners of your defense contractors, your media, your banks, and your debt, the real power lies elsewhere. The inevitable consequence of this pattern is not a violent collapse, but a gradual, silent financial feudalism. When a small group controls the energy, the money supply, the information flow, and the vast majority of the real assets, the middle class ceases to be a functional, independent entity. You become a permanent, low-wage renter of both physical property and digital services, all owned by the same few players. The danger isn't that they will take our wealth. The danger is that they will debase the value of our currency and our labor until the wealth we hold is meaningless compared to their hard assets. Inflation is not merely an economic cycle. It is a mechanism for wealth transfer. The pattern continues. The final, terrifying event will be the completion of the digital fiat system. The introduction of central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, would give the central banks and the private institutions that influence them precedented atomic control over every transaction, every individual, and every single economic choice you make. When empires fall, the public is often caught off guard, watching the political leadership disintegrate. But this time, the political leadership has already ceded control. The financial empire never falls. It simply upgrades its operating system. It will be sudden, and it will be final. The lesson of the hidden empire is not that a powerful elite exists. That has always been true. The lesson is that their power is built on our ignorance of the system. We have been conditioned to look up to the politicians, to the flags, to the headlines. But the real power structure operates beneath the surface, in the fine print of national debt, in the trusts, and in the sheer scale of generational wealth that no single election can ever dismantle. The only real defense against an invisible empire is to make it visible. To understand the flow of capital is to understand the true hierarchy of power. To trace the debt is to find the rulers. It's up to us to stop discussing the symptoms and start discussing the architecture itself. If you want to understand the patterns that truly shape our world and see the hidden architecture behind global economics and finance, make sure you hit that subscribe button. The world runs on a secret blueprint. Just showed you the first page.